A funeral procession for Iran's assassinated general in Baghdad turns into a massive protest against the United States. Venezuela's National Assembly prepares to elect its new leaders. 70 opposition members are rebelling against Juan Guaidó. And Catalans protest against another coup as Spain's parliament debates whether to confirm Pedro Sanchez as prime minister. Hello and welcome to Telesur. I'm Doris Polo in Quito, and this is From the South. Thousands of tearful mourners have followed the coffins of Iran's top general Qasem Soleimani and his close Iraqi associate Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis through the streets of Baghdad, chanting "Death to America." Mourners gathered at the city's Al-Muthanna airport early in the morning, waving Iraqi and militia flags. They then moved to the gates of the heavily fortified Green Zone, where the U.S. Embassy is located, before proceeding to the Shia Muslim holy cities of Karbala and Najaf. The funeral procession marked the beginning of days of mourning, as his body will be returned to Iran for a final burial in his hometown on Tuesday. Soleimani, al-Muhandis, and 8 members of their convoy were killed in a U.S. airstrike early on Friday. On reaching Karbala, mourners carried the coffins of Soleimani, al-Muhandis, and the 8 others as they gathered for a funeral service at the Imam Abbas Mosque. Iraqi Prime Minister Adel Abdul Mahdi joined the thousands in the procession. The U.S. attack has caused regional tensions to soar, with Iran vowing revenge. And Palestinians took to the streets of Gaza to give their final salute to General Soleimani. The angry crowds burned the U.S. and Israeli flags to express their anger at the killing of the top Iranian commander. They chanted anti-U.S. slogans and vowed to honor General Soleimani by continuing the resistance against U.S. and Israeli aggression.
We as the Palestinian resistance have organized this morning ceremony to condemn this American crime and reject it. We say to these people, if they think that this crime will stop the resistance, then this will not happen, because we are following the path of the martyrs against the American hegemony.
Iran's Quds forces have raised a red flag over the Jamkaran Mosque in the Shiite holy city of Qom, signaling a call for revenge for the murder of General Soleimani. On Friday, the leader of the Islamic Revolution, Sayyid Ali Khamenei, vowed to avenge Soleimani's murder. The Quds have promised not to lower the flag until Soleimani has been avenged. Red flags in Shiite tradition symbolize blood spilled unjustly and serve as a call to avenge a person who has been murdered. Our correspondent Hisham Wanous has more on the fallout from the assassination of Qasem Soleimani.
After the assassination of Lieutenant General Qasem Soleimani, the commander of the Revolutionary Guards Al-Quds Force, and also of Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, deputy commander of the Popular Mobilization Units in Iraq, the situation in the Middle East has become very tense. The murders of these men by the United States have drawn widespread condemnation and promises of revenge. There were reports in the Iraqi media in the early hours of Saturday of another U.S. airstrike on a convoy of the Popular Mobilization Units north of Baghdad, saying that 6 other leaders had been killed. However, these reports were later refuted by the movement itself and also by the U.S.-led coalition. Among the many condemnations of the assassination of General Soleimani, the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad sent 2 telegrams, one to the supreme leader of the Islamic Revolution in Iran, Ali Khamenei, and the other to the Iranian President Hassan Rouhani. In these, he said that the assassination of Soleimani by the United States will only strengthen the resistance bloc, and that it was carried out in revenge for the defeat of the Islamic State group in Syria and Iraq, in which General Qasem Soleimani played such a key role. President Rouhani visited the family of the murdered general in Tehran to convey his condolences. And at that meeting, he said that the United States had made a serious mistake with this attack and that it would have to face the consequences. He said these consequences would play out for years to come, not only in Iran, but among all Muslims and all freedom-loving people around the world. The Iranian representative at the United Nations called the assassination a crime and an act of war against Iran, and he said that such a military action would receive a military response, although when and where this response would happen will only be known in the future. In Iraq, the Kataib Hezbollah movement said it would respond with missiles and other weapons, and that its fighters are armed and ready to act whenever they receive the order to do so. The Iranian foreign minister also spoke on the phone with his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, who expressed his condolences and warned that this aggression by the United States would aggravate the situation in the Middle East. The foreign minister of Qatar also visited Tehran to discuss the situation after the US attack. The US president himself, Donald Trump, has said he ordered the killing to prevent a war, not to start one, claiming that General Soleimani was preparing attacks on US diplomats and soldiers in the region. He said he was also sending about 150 US troops from Italy to Lebanon to protect the US embassy there, and another 3,000 US troops to Kuwait. So the situation is increasingly tense. Iran has promised revenge, and that is what the mourners in Baghdad were demanding this Saturday as well. The funeral procession there turned into a huge demonstration of protest against the United States. Soleimani's body will be taken back to Iran on Sunday, where there will be funeral activities in the north and in Tehran before it is taken to his home city of Kerman for the final burial.
Now, demonstrators have taken to the streets of different cities across the United States to denounce the killing of General Qasem Soleimani. The demonstrators are also angered by the Trump administration's decision to send more troops to the Middle East, an act which they say is likely to escalate tension in the region. The biggest protests took place outside the White House in Washington, D.C. Protests were also held outside the Trump Tower in Chicago and New York City's Times Square. We'll take a short break now. When we come back, St. Vincent begins to serve on the UN Security Council. So join us again in a minute. Welcome back. Bolivia's new electoral court has set the date for fresh elections as the 3rd of May. The results of last October's elections, which President Evo Morales won, were suspended when a military coup forced him to leave the country. Lawmakers from his party later reached an agreement with the de facto authorities to elect a new electoral body that would call fresh elections. The new TSE has also dismissed a petition to ban Evo Morales' party, the Movement Towards Socialism, from standing.
The electoral body will call for elections on Sunday, May the 3rd, 2020, so that Bolivians can elect the President of the Republic and the members of Parliament. The date of the elections is therefore confirmed as May the 3rd, 2020.
This Sunday, the parliamentary year begins in Venezuela. All eyes are on who will take over the role of Speaker, and whether it will be Juan Guaido, who proclaimed himself president last January and organized a series of failed attempts to overthrow the Bolivarian government, or if a candidate will emerge with the support of Chavista lawmakers.
The scene is set for the election of the new leaders of Venezuela's National Assembly. Each member has one vote, but the votes are divided. The opposition is split. A group of 70 lawmakers declared themselves in rebellion, and they could put Juan Guaido, the current Speaker of the Assembly, in checkmate. Accusations of corruption came and went.
Juan Guaido has no moral qualities. He has no ethical or legal standing. Because he is corrupt, I challenge him to face a thorough investigation. I challenge you, Juan Guaido. There is corruption here, and we are rebelling here in the Assembly against that. We have had enough. They have tried to make out we are being bought, but we are just frustrated and angry.
The corruption scandals involving money for humanitarian aid, the stealing of shares in Citgo and other cases badly undermined Guaido at the end of 2019.
I don't think the Venezuelan opposition is going anywhere. The accusations made by lawmakers against the speaker with the theft of money, extravagant spending and waste, and the exclusion of some of their own lawmakers, that's why they're upset. And more than 70 of them are denouncing the corruption of Juan Guaido and his criminal gang.
These members of the Oversight Committee broke their silence when they were expelled and accused of receiving money for ending an investigation into businessmen supposedly linked to the government. They rejected the accusations as baseless and motivated by revenge.
They are scared. Is it a crime for me to say I won't vote for Juan Guaidó?
Other members of the Assembly strongly opposed the belligerent and violent actions of Juan Guaidó, the figure promoted by the United States. These went from his self-proclamation as president to the attempted invasion with humanitarian aid and the failed military coups.
I do not support Juan Guaidó's leadership because he has done damage to Venezuela. He has led us into confrontation and hatred. He has even promoted invasion and civil war. That is why I will not be voting for Juan Guaidó on Sunday.
The discontent within the opposition is also a result of Guaidó not fulfilling their agreement, which would have given the leadership of the National Assembly to the smaller parties. But the bigger parties, the so-called Group of Four, Democratic Action, Primero Justicia, Popular Will and the UNT, decided to support Juan Guaidó for re-election. But there's no consensus, and he may not have enough votes.
The United States wants Guaidó to stay on, to avoid a retreat. They have been in crisis for months because the opposition has failed to mobilize and motivate opposition supporters. So the least they can do is keep Guaidó in place to avoid admitting a defeat. So this vote is key and will help shape what happens in the coming year.
The Chavista lawmakers will not vote for Juan Guaidó. They are supporting an alternative opposition figure who can help to get the National Assembly out of its breach of the Constitution and recognize President Nicolas Maduro. Time is passing, and parliamentary elections are due to be held this year.
All the opposition parties, their members, and their local leaders, those who really have the votes, are ready to take part in the elections for the National Assembly. The extremist sector, who the United States gave its backing, this extremist sector of Guaidó will be completely isolated and defeated in their attempt to sabotage the elections. We will have parliamentary elections, and they will be very participative.
This Sunday could bring surprises. The ball is in the court of the opposition rebels, those who oppose Guaidó. The vote will be key to how the political chessboard is arranged for 2020, both inside Venezuela and internationally.
Welcome back. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the smallest country to be voted onto the United Nations Security Council, has taken up its position with a flag installation ceremony taking place on Thursday. Permanent representative to the council, Inga Randa King, pledged the island's impartial perspective on global security issues.
This day is a historic one, not only because we are the smallest nation ever to sit on the Security Council, but also, perhaps, because the urgency of now calls for fresh, disinterested and impartial perspectives on the seemingly intractable problems of our day. St. Vincent and the Grenadines has no geopolitical axe to grind. We are just a young nation that yearns for a better world.
Barbados Prime Minister Mia Amor Motley says her government is committed to abolishing the common entrance examination for children in the country.
10 or 11 years old is too young to ask a child to determine what their life should look like for the rest of their life. And I'm glad that the Minister of Education is fully recovered and ready now in 2020 to lead that discussion with the Barbadian people, because in so doing we will have to determine whether we literally expand primary education, we create middle schools, and we also create schools of excellence such that every single secondary school that will take children, if we do the middle schools from third form on, is a school of excellence. And we do this conscious that as she deals with formal education, the country must also deal with non-formal education.
A roadside bombing in Burkina Faso's northwestern region has killed 14 civilians, most of them students. According to local media reports, the incident happened on Saturday when a bus carrying students from holidays hit on a homemade bomb on a highway near the country's border with Mali. The incident occurred a few hours after security forces repelled an attack on a military base by unidentified gunmen. Burkina Faso has, in the last couple of years, seen a sharp increase in armed attacks on civilians and security forces. Libya's parliament has voted to cut all diplomatic ties with Turkey after Ankara's lawmakers approved a bill authorizing the deployment of troops to the North African country. The Benghazi-based legislative body, which is allied with General Khalifa Haftar, also voted for the closure of the country's embassy in Ankara. Turkey's parliament on Thursday voted in favor of sending troops to Libya to support the Tripoli-based Government of National Accord, or GNA, which is embroiled in fierce fighting with Haftar's so-called Libyan National Army. And the African Union has expressed deep concern about the deteriorating security situation in Libya. A statement by the continental body's chairperson, Musa Mahamat, called on the international community to desist from engaging in any conduct which increases the risk of violent confrontations between the warring factions. The AU reiterated its commitment to finding a political solution to end the conflict, which has already killed more than 1,000 people and displaced thousands more. The Spanish Parliament has begun its debate on the investiture of Pedro Sanchez as Prime Minister. The socialist leader opened the session, laying out his plans for a government in coalition with the radical left United Podemos party. He emphasized the need to defend public services, and he talked about his agreement with the Republican left party in Catalonia to open talks with the independence movement. The debate is expected to conclude next week.
Firstly, economic growth, the creation of decent jobs, the pension sustainability. Secondly, the digitalization of our economy. Thirdly, fair ecological transition. Fourth, the real equality between men and women. Fifth, social justice. Sixth, the dialogue of Spain united in its diversity and committed to a Europe based on human rights. I announced that we will create a group of bilateral dialogue between the government of Spain and the government of the Generalitat of Catalonia. We will create it and debate within the constitutional legal framework and will put an end to this terrible conflict.
Well, in his reply, the leader of the right-wing Popular Party attacked Sanchez's agreement to talk with Catalan pro-independence parties, and he referred to an incident on Friday when Catalan protesters removed Spanish flags from a public building.
¿Usted duerme bien?
Do you sleep well at night?
¿Usted ha dormido bien esta noche?
Have you slept well last night? Have you been able to sleep after the show that your partners in government performed last night? Or are you like the other 95% of Spaniards who, as you said, will not be able to sleep in light of the government deal, which you should be ashamed to have brought to this house?
Our correspondent Adriana Cardoso has more from Madrid.
The first round of replies in this debate was led by the leader of the Popular Party, Pablo Casado. He accused Pedro Sánchez of proposing a nightmare government for Spain, in alliance with those he said want to break up Spain. He also said that Sánchez had come to office through a motion of no confidence, and that he wants to perpetuate himself in power through another confidence motion. Pedro Sánchez then had a chance to reply to Casado, and he said he had no intention of breaking up Spain, but only of breaking the political deadlock. He also reminded Casado that it wasn't his party, but the left, who had won the elections. He accused both the PP and the far-right Vox party of resorting to legal manipulation to try to block his investiture as prime minister. The debate began at 9 in the morning, with Pedro Sánchez opening the speech. He spoke for about 2 hours, saying that it is necessary in Catalonia to return to the political path and abandon the legal path. He also explained the main points of his political program, including the reversal of the rights labor reform, the introduction of rent controls, and measures to combat climate change. The round of replies from other parties is continuing, and at the end of that, on Sunday, there will be the first vote that requires an absolute majority, which Sanchez is not expected to get. So they will then have to wait 48 hours until Tuesday, when Sanchez is expected to be approved as Prime Minister with a simple majority.
Now, hundreds of pro-independence protesters gathered in Barcelona to show support for Catalan Regional President Quim Torra, who was recently banned from public office. Demonstrators marched towards the Catalan parliament waving separatist flags and chanting, "Torra President." This while an extraordinary meeting was being held after Spain's electoral committee barred him from his position as lawmaker in the regional parliament on Friday. Torra was banned for his refusal to remove separatist symbols from government buildings.
We are experiencing a new attempt to alter the popular will of the Catalans, a new blow to democracy. In fact, a coup d'etat against the institution of our country. There are people who believe that when they do not like a president, a government, or a parliament, there is no need to respect any limits to destroy him.
Protests by French workers' unions against the government's planned pension reform have taken place for the 31st consecutive day. The protests, which began on December 5th last year, have continued to grow despite facing widespread violence and repression at the hands of security forces. The government claims that the reforms are necessary to prevent future economic collapse, but the unions insist that workers stand to lose out if the reforms, which include raising the retirement age from 62 to 64, are implemented.
People have to think a bit about what kind of society they want in general, and on a more personal level. Whether you are 20, 30, 40, or 50, one day you'll retire. If the currently proposed system passes in the way that it's laid out, it will be a social catastrophe. Already, the previous reforms are seeing people retire with measly pensions.
The Lunar New Year is one of the most important events of Chinese culture, and this year the celebration takes place on January 25th. Leading up to this day, millions of Chinese citizens will be going back to their hometowns to be with their families.
The Chinese New Year leads to one of the biggest human migrations of the year. In 2020, about 3 million people predicted to return to their hometowns to celebrate the Chinese Lunar New Year, which this time will be the year of the rat.
This is a very important festival. I'm about to head back home as well. The Spring Festival is very important because it's one of the traditional Chinese festivities that every Chinese person celebrates. I go home every year because returning to your home is very important.
During Chanyun, as the traveling season leading up to the New Year festival is often referred, millions of people hit the road, take trains or planes to return to their hometowns and villages.
We all come home once a year to celebrate together this holiday. Even if many people travel during this period, it's not hard to get train tickets. We buy them online. It's easier.
Over the last few years, more and more young people prefer to travel abroad during this time, many of them saying that they grew tired of talking about sensitive topics such as marriage, children and income with distant family members.
We return to our hometowns for this spring festival. We are obliged to go home because it's the tradition for the new year.
Meanwhile, Chinese authorities have implemented special measures to help people travel safely and smoothly during the Chinese Lunar New Year.
And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media. For Telesur English, I'm Doris Polo. Thank you for watching.